Well, hi everybody, and I hope you were able to make it through the sweltering heat wave that we recently had. I hope you don't mind the sunglasses, but since I'm no longer on television, I can go without the sunglasses, and the sun is pretty glaring out here. Today I think we have a special treat, and I really would appreciate your feedback on this. For those of you who are football fans, even if you're not a football fan, I think what's coming up you're going to enjoy. September 12th, which is this coming Saturday, September 12th, 1970. Probably one of the most significant college football games ever played because of what it represented and what it meant and what it's done for the game when it comes to integration. One man played in that game that I'm a very close friend of, John Papadakis. He was a linebacker for USC. He was kind enough to sit down with me and reminisce about the 50-year anniversary of that game. I think you'll find it very, very interesting. And like I said, after the interview is over, I'd love for you to send your comments, good, bad, and indifferent, because we're going to do more of these. We're going to find special people of significant events and bring you a little more of an in-depth look at that event. So again, sit back, enjoy it. John Papadakis, 50 years after one of the most significant football games ever played. So John, when did you guys find out that you were going to play in Alabama?
It was a spring football, 1970. Coach McKay introduced the subject. This game wasn't even supposed to be played because it was the college football season was 10 games.
Right.
And the NC2A during their winter meetings had decided to allow an 11th game. Bear Bryant knew exactly what he wanted to do with that opportunity. Schedules are set up years in advance, so they had no chance of playing SC.
Do you think that he knew this was the only way that he could get the attention of the people back there?
He knew it was the best way to get their attention. He knew that by displaying.
Because he wanted blacks on the team.
Yes, he needed them. He not only wanted them, he needed them. There was pressure within his own university. A black student union was after him to open up and get black players on the team.
Because back at that time, people today, they see football, college football and everything, it's so integrated and what have you, and most of those teams are predominantly black athletes now. But we're talking 50 years ago. I mean, nobody went to the South that had a black player on their squad to play them.
No, very few. They weren't welcome. There were no black players in the Southeastern Conference at that time, and certainly not on the Alabama team. And they prided themselves on their gentry class team. Yeah. And they also prided themselves on a very tough brand of football. And you had to be tough enough to play Bear Bryant style football. If you remember the book Junction Boys, when Bear Bryant was a coach at Texas A&M, he took 130 kids to a place called Junction, Texas, damn near tortured them to death, and only 35 came back to play the season. He played the season with 35 people because his way of coaching football was to run off the weak, run off the quitters. So the way they kept the blacks out of their game was kind of a wink-wink arrangement with the lie that they weren't tough enough to play their game, and that they'd quit if you hit them hard enough, and they wouldn't play 4 quarters of football. And Sam, running over by and through them like they were white ghosts, dispelled that theory, proved it to be a lie. And then the Southern people, yes, they wanted some of them Sam Cunninghams on their team because they were tough.
Because that was the era. I mean, the era was that, they were good, they were big, but they had no place on our team. So now the game.
They lacked the character to play that game, and that was a lie, and that's how they kept him out.
Right, now you got the game. Did McKay ask you guys if there was some trepidation about going to the South?
No, he said, he never made any racial comments about the game there or why we were playing the game. All he assured us of is that we would be secure and safe, and that Bear Bryant had guaranteed that. And, we always got motorcades everywhere we went anyway, but we figured we'd really have extra security. And it was a strange era because if you remember, the big independent movie hit at that time was called Easy Rider.
Yep.
It was about 2 guys who were different, hippie-style guys who go from the West all the way to the South. And what happens to them? They get killed because they're different.
Yep.
And because they won't conform to what's going on down there in the South, and because they're different, they get killed. And that was the national mentality. We figured if you go to the South, you're in trouble.
Did any guys on the team, any of the black players on the team, you had what, 14 on the black team?
About 18.
18?
We went down there with 16 to 18, I believe.
Any of them express fear about going down there?
Not only fear, they took weapons with them.
I was going to ask you that because their stories
They took weapons.
Some guys, a lot of guys packed.
Well, a couple of them did,
Did the coach know that?
and then a couple of them had knives too. And I'm not saying who, but it was the teammates knew within the team.
Did McKay know?
Well, he didn't know at the time. And keep in mind, we didn't have we went through no metal detection. We had charter flights. And we packed our own gear, and. But I saw a weapon or two brandished when I went in to visit my teammates in the room.
Were you fearful of going down there in the South?
No, I figured they're going to be tight. I'm not black and I'm not white. I'm Greek, so
Yeah, but you've
we're
never
a little
been.
different.
But you've never been to the South, though.
Well, I had never been to the South, but I trusted what our coach had told us. And besides that, I was defensive signal caller, and I was defensive captain on the team, so I had my hands full. This is the first game I was going to start.
Yeah.
And we wanted to, I wanted to show well, and I was consumed with that. And if you talk to Sam Cunningham, he'll tell you the same thing. He was just concerned about performing well, because at USC there's plenty of competition, and it doesn't matter if you're designated starter. You could lose your job after a few plays if you weren't careful.
So at no time did any of the coaches tell you, hey, we're going to the South, blacks aren't welcome there, the story?
Never. Not once. They just said, we'll be safe and secure. They approached it like any other game. However, when we arrived in Alabama, we knew something was different because they were at least 2,000 or 3,000 people at the airport. Every band, high school band from the area, the officials, George Wallace himself was there to shake our hands and welcome us to the state of Alabama. Not a black face at the airport, all white. When we drove through the Birmingham to our hotel, we went through some very poor areas. The black people came out on the sidewalk hailing us like we were a liberating army.
At that moment, did you realize, whoa, this is going to be something different?
Wait, and not only that, there were big billboards of Bear Bryant walking on water and drinking a Coke. There were Coke advertisements. So we figured we were in someplace else.
And the game was in Birmingham?
Yeah.
Okay.
We were in heaven, and Bear Bryant was God.
So you guys leave on a Friday night?
I can't remember. I believe we left Friday afternoon.
Okay, so you spent that on Friday night?
We spent that evening there. There's an interesting story about when we went to a movie. We all go to a movie. Well, first there's a fabulous story which in a microcosm tells of the whole experience going down there. I had a roommate named Kent Carter. It was front page news in LAPD when he passed away. He was killed on a motorcycle accident. He was a wonderful trainer for the LAPD and highly honored. And he was a fellow linebacker with me. Black man. Handsome guy. So we all went to our rooms, immediately after we got our keys. And some of us went quite quickly because they were children in that travel lodge which we were staying in, who were, was walking around or recreating or in the pool. And when they saw the black players, started screaming to their parents, hey, there's such and such are coming into our hotel. They had never seen black players, not just in their neighborhood, because it was an upper middle class neighborhood where this hotel travel lodge was. Keep in mind, this is 1970. And they were, flabbergasted. They never saw such big guys of that color in their part of town, let alone checking into their hotel. So some curious kids from the shopping center nearby were walking around the rooms, knocking on doors, just for the chance, do you have any such and such in your room? If you can imagine. They just wanted to look at them and see them.
First time?
Yeah.
That close?
Well, and dressed up like that. and so they knocked on my door, and they said, I opened the door, I thought it was a manager calling us to a meeting or something. And they said, do you have any such and such in there? And I said, yeah, I've got one right here. And my roommate was pissed, and he was laughing. And I said, come in, children, and see him. And there was two boys and a little girl. and I think they were brothers and sisters. So the little one, who had to be 4 or 5, walked right up to him because he was the most, innocent and least suspecting. He said, "Are you a such and such?" And Ken Carter picked him up by the waist. He said, "No, I'm a black man." Wow. And he held him eye to eye, and he said, "And black is beautiful." And he took the boy's hand and rubbed it down his face. And the little boy instinctually just put his arms around him and grabbed him. And Ken Carter grabbed the kid, and he says, "Black is beautiful." Wow. And he puts the kid down. The other 2 kids are standing back by me, and they're flabbergasted. Their eyes are like big giant saucers. And they say, "What do we tell our parents?" I said, "Tell them what you saw. Tell them the truth." They said, "They won't believe us." I said, "Tell them anyway." Dave, that in a microcosm was what happened between, that's what needed to happen down there.
1970. I mean, it's 50 years ago. 50 years ago on Saturday the 12th. People today, of course we've made progress, but there's still a lot more to go. But people have no idea. I think the people today, and correct me if I'm wrong, had no idea what it was like to be.
Well, there was a real difference there, and the difference was an opportunity. And what this, believe it or not, I'm a local here in San Pedro in the harbor area. I'm the local founder of the NAACP chapter. And the reason I did that was because I believe in equal opportunity for everyone. I think opportunity is the most important thing you can give an American, regardless of what culture you are. So there, they lack the opportunity. Not in other parts of the country, I don't believe, anyway, but it's particularly in the South, they were held back.
Did you have a lot of protection, a lot of troopers around you?
Yeah, we were covered with police, and
both out the building.
They were also plainclothesmen, who were around, making sure that everything was normal.
To your knowledge, did anybody on the team, any of the black players, get any kind of threats or any kind of?
They were, shunned, and I remember there's a couple stories about blacks going to a retail store and buying something, and the people didn't want to put the change in their hand, or didn't want to touch them or be near them. We went to a movie that night, and I think it was a Clint Eastwood movie, either that or John Wayne. It was either Clint Eastwood or John Wayne, and when we went to the theater, it was a large theater. They didn't have multiplex theaters then. And when we walked in, the people were stunned, and because we're in coats and ties and we're big people. And they were stunned. They had never seen blacks in that theater, let alone in that neighborhood. And they started to walk out. By the end of the movie, we were the only people in the theater.
I'll be darned.
How'd you like that?
Wow.
That was a good movie. We enjoyed the movie, but they weren't there.
They served you popcorn, I presume?
If the same people went to the game, they saw Alabama, there were nobody left in the stadium after
the game. Now the game is, McKay never said anything. He never said this is an important game, this is a vital game, this is a game.
Marv Gu said something.
Okay.
Right before, Marv Gu and I were very close. And he was a defensive coach. So I was always right next to him. And I said, this is just like the Battle of the Bulge, and he lost his father in the Battle of the Bulge. And he says, "No, Johnny." He says, "This is Civil War, and we're the good guys." And then before we went on the field.
Wow.
How you like that?
Well, it sounds like Goo. I mean, he was that kind of a coach, that kind of an inspiration. So the game's on. You didn't notice, either consciously or subconsciously, anything? I mean, nobody on the Alabama team went out of their way to say anything? Or
Alabama's highly disciplined. We get some cat calls out of the, racial slurs out of the crowd, and this and that, and boogie woogie and whatever, out of the crowd. But nothing.
Not from the players.
Nothing that I heard directly.
Did McKay or any of the coaches warn you about that?
We always stay within ourselves.
Okay.
We never embarrass our team or our colors. I mean, if you got a penalty for being, a rat on the field or something like that, you wouldn't play again. Yeah. So we had our own system. We were a highly disciplined team, and Coach McKay was our master, and we didn't want to offend him. I mean, if you got an injury and you could make it off the field, you had better crawl off the field rather than call a timeout, because if you waste one of timeouts for your injury, you're not going to see the field again. You're going to be injured for the rest of your career. I mean, that's how tough they were at that time.
So the game's on.
And we didn't speak when we played. You know how these players talk to each other and berate one another? We weren't allowed to speak.
Very quiet, very different.
Yeah.
The game's on. Did you think you were going to any way you could lose that game?
Not after the first few series. They didn't make a meaningful first down in the first half.
But going into the game, you know the importance of it.
Yeah, but we were flying around, especially the blacks on our team. They were highly charged. Their feet didn't touch the ground. They played 3 feet off the ground. They were so quick and all over the place because of the energy generated by playing in the state of Alabama. It was special to them.
Sure.
To go down there and play well.
Scores 42-21. Cunningham went crazy.
It could have been 60-0.
Well, I was going to say, do you think McKay held back because of
Sure he did. Of course he did. Coach Levy said, let's open up. Let's let him have it. Let's give it to him. And McKay wouldn't do that. He had planned this game with his friend, Bear Bryant, to help him with integration, even though Bear Bryant didn't even say that. McKay figured it out after a while. Sure. He understood the meaning. The real meaning of the game was to display the great African-American talent that USC had. But not just the talent, that they could see how a team functioned with blacks and whites together harmoniously. They could see a white player and a black player. Sam scores a touchdown, he comes on the sidelines, he hugs me. He's a black and white player hugging and trading sweat. That was unfathomable to them.
At what point did you realize in the game, hey man, we're really making a statement here? These people in the stands.
First quarter, when they couldn't move the ball, we knew they'd had it. We ran over them and they couldn't move the ball.
And the cat call stopped?
Nothing. Everything was silent. As a matter of fact, by the end of the game, you could hear there were hundreds, if not a couple thousand, black people outside the stadium listening on transistor radios, cheering when we would do something well. As a matter of fact, Bill Holland, who scored a touchdown at the end of the game, also a fullback like Sam Cunningham, scored a touchdown at the end of the game. There was a roar, and we didn't know where it came from. It was from outside the stadium. What we discovered outside the stadium after the game, you remember when we came in the airport, not a black face there, right? But when we left, there was not a white face around. There were all blacks around our buses, singing hymns, holding candles, beating Bibles on the buses, because we had set them free. We had beaten Alabama. They love their team, don't get me wrong. They love the Tide.
But you made the point.
But they wanted access to the Tide too, and we gave it to them.
On the play ride home, anything said? McKay say anything?
It was a very joyous ride because Sam had done something special, and he was recognized by Bear Bryant. Came into our locker room, put his arm around him, and took him, and introduced him to a couple people I know, and I was elated because I was the leading tackler.
Oh, you had part of the game. Defensive player of the game.
Defensive, but I was elated because it was my first game, and I felt like I established myself.
How about old Governor Wallace? He come in and say?
No, he didn't. We saw him at the airport. That was it.
He didn't.
That was it.
At what point did you say to yourself, was it that night, maybe later that day, when you said, we really did something special here?
We had to play Nebraska the next week, and Nebraska was the eventual national champion that year. Mm-hmm. So we had our hands full.
Okay.
And we didn't. We weren't. The way the football, you have to face, pay the piper every Saturday when you play. And college football is very competitive. And at SC, it was extremely competitive. So no matter how well you did, it doesn't last long.
At what point then, let me put it this way, at what point did you realize that this game was something special?
In terms of this game,
yeah.
let me tell you what the genesis of this whole thing was. The game was played to be forgotten. It was under the radar. It wasn't on national television. You may have heard it on the local radio station.
Local radio, but it wasn't national radio.
It wasn't national.
And no ABC game.
It was purposely played that way to go under the radar because it was the ultimate race card game, yet not played as such. It was played to be forgotten so as not to make a statement to shove the black players down the people's throats in Alabama. Mm-hmm. Nowadays it's an in-your-face thing.
Yeah.
And everyone's got a neon statement to make. Not then. It was subtle. It was done with great class. And that's why I think the game was so effective. Well, that's why it truly changed the South, because it was done in a way that the people there could accept it and really learn a lesson from it.
Because the next year, Alabama had a black player.
SC had already had 2 black players who won Heisman trophies. Alabama needed a black hero. And Sam became that magically. And good, celestially appointed because he's such a humble, wonderful guy, and the perfect guy to be a hero, of a game like that, because he was an aw shucks, I was just doing my best, and he still says that to that day.
Would college football have evolved the way it did without that game?
I think eventually it would have,
But it's taken a
it's
while.
inevitable. But it would have taken longer, and it wouldn't have been done. It was a swooping effect because Bear Bryant was the king of Southern coaches, king of all coaches in America. And what he accepted and did, others followed. He wanted black players when he was a coach at Kentucky. But, the social mores and ways of the places he coached wouldn't accept him. He realized that it was time to change, and he called on his friend John McKay to help him change. Now listen to this crazy fact. We went down there with 18, I believe it was 18, black African-American players on our roster. If you look at our team picture that year. We helped them change in Alabama with black players. In the decade of the 1970s, Alabama went on to have the most successful decade in the history of college football. I think 3 national championships. Yep. Mm-hmm. And in 1979, if you look at Alabama's team picture, they have the same amount of black players that we had that we went down there with that night. So it took time.
Yep.
But look at the effect of the change.
Well, I, for one, don't think college football would have evolved as quickly as it did without that game.
Well, when the two greatest coaches in the game, McKay and Bryant, get together, and, the byproduct is studied by everyone. We as Americans, what I love about this game is what it says culturally, and it can reflect on what's happening today. I believe America doesn't change on TV. I don't believe America changes in the boardroom, and I don't believe it really changes in legislatures. I think American changes on fields and in yards. I think it changes in alleys and neighborhoods. I think it changes when people see the truth for themselves, and then they, volitionally change. And they change inside too. And I believe that this was a great example of how America changes positively within the structure of our institutions. And athletics is so great because it educates our passions. We're also passionate about it, yeah. And we have to be honest about it as well.
When you see the game today, mm-hmm. Do you think back 50 years ago that night in Alabama?
Oh, sure. Sure, because I remember their $1 Million Band and the fanfare and, the whole thing. If college football doesn't get any better than it is at LSU and those places that have tradition.
And you must be proud of the fact that you helped change it.
I'm proud of the fact that I was on a team, first that I went to USC and played in such a competitive atmosphere and was able to play. And proud that Sam Cunningham, the genesis of this whole story and me writing it was the fact that Sam Cunningham praised me as the toughest player that he'd ever played against. And I read about that. It was about in the late 90s, mid-90s, Doug Krikorian, your buddy. Sure. He was interviewing him, and he said that. And I read that, and I said, look at that damn guy. I said, So I remembered the game, and I remembered the quote after the game by Jerry Claiborne. Jerry Claiborne was an assistant coach on Alabama at that time, and he said something that Bear Bryant would have said, but he couldn't say it. I think it was a plant. He said it. He said, Sam Cunningham did more for integration in 60 minutes of football than Martin Luther King's done in 20 years of politics. The quote has always embarrassed Sam Cunningham, but there's a great measure of truth in it that Sam did something so dramatic and undeniably great that in fair competition, which is the American way to win.
So when people think about college football and the way race relations are now today, there's always bumps in the road, obviously. Nothing's perfect. September 12, 1970 is a day that people should remember. That's
a tipping point of equal opportunity and fairness all over the country for the black athlete, I believe. And any type of athlete, that's... like I said, it speaks to the greatness of our system that allows for change and does change. And it's difficult to culturally change, but things started to change that day.
And you have hope today?
Have hope today. I think I'll refer you all to Jim Murray's column. He after the game, he was the only one who saw it for what it was. And it's in our book, Turning of the Tide, his full column. But yes, I believe there's great hope for America when we look at each other with respect and that we change within our institutional frameworks and make it better. That's what America's about, making it better all the time.
John, thank you for the time. And the last question I'm going to leave you with is, who do you want to play you in the movie?